A quiet evening erupts in violence when a group of racist thugs targets an innocent woman. But they have no idea the woman's brother isn't just any man. He's a highly trained Delta Force operative. The events that follow are a deadly lesson in underestimating someone you think is powerless. The night was supposed to be ordinary. The city hummed with its usual blend of distant sirens, late-night traffic, and a low murmur of people winding down their day. In a modest apartment on the edge of town, Tasha, a young woman with a bright future, was finishing up her work on a late project. She was smart, independent, and careful, someone who knew the risks of the world, but thought she could navigate them safely. Her neighborhood, while far from perfect, had been home for years. She knew the familiar faces, the routines, and the subtle dangers that often went unnoticed. But no amount of caution could prepare her for the storm about to descend. Across town, a group of local thugs, fueled by hatred and ignorance, were wandering the streets, looking for an easy target. They didn't see Tasha as a person. They saw her as an opportunity for dominance, for proving a twisted sense of power. Fueled by racial prejudice and reckless bravado, they honed in on her apartment, thinking no one would stop them. Tasha, oblivious to the danger outside her door, finished her work and leaned back in her chair. Her phone buzzed with a message from her brother, Marcus. A subtle smile crossed her face as she read his words. Marcus wasn't just a brother. He was her protector, her rock, though she never fully realized the extent of his capabilities. He often joked about being a little more capable than your average guy, but she never imagined just how true that was. The thugs arrived, moving quickly and confidently, thinking the night would be easy. They were wrong. The quiet of Tasha's apartment was shattered by the sudden pounding on her door. At first, she thought it might be a delivery or a neighbor needing help, but the intensity of the knocks, paired with muffled voices outside, sent a chill down her spine. She peered through the peephole and froze. 3 men, faces partially covered, were trying to break in. "Open up!" one of them shouted, their voices laced with venom and a dangerous sense of entitlement. Tasha's heart raced as fear clamped down like iron around her chest. She fumbled for her phone, dialing 911, but the signal seemed to falter, and her trembling hands barely managed to hit the emergency button. Panic surged as the door splintered under a violent kick. The intruders forced their way inside, their intentions clear in every hostile glance. They were looking for control, for dominance, and for the thrill of inflicting terror on someone they deemed less than. Tasha tried to reason, to plead, but her words fell on deaf ears. The room erupted into chaos. Tasha dodged, ducked, and scrambled toward the small kitchen, seeking anything to defend herself. Her attackers moved with aggression, driven by hatred more than logic. In a blur of movement, a chair toppled, a vase shattered, and her voice echoed through the apartment as she screamed for help. Through the panic, Tasha's survival instincts kicked in. She tried to buy time, using every ounce of composure she could muster, knowing deep down that help was on the way, even if she didn't yet realize who that help would be. The attackers, confident in their supposed supremacy, were about to face a reckoning they never imagined. By the time the chaos subsided, Tasha was bruised, shaken, and struggling to catch her breath. The thugs had fled as quickly as they had entered, leaving behind the wreckage of her once quiet apartment. Broken glass glittered on the floor, a stark reminder of how quickly her life had been turned upside down. The sirens of approaching police cars cut through the night, but their presence brought little comfort. Tasha's fear had evolved into a simmering anger. She knew that justice from law enforcement might be slow or uncertain, but one thing was crystal clear: someone she loved would not stand idly by. Marcus arrived shortly after, summoned by the faint alert of his sister's call. He assessed the scene with sharp, trained eyes. Every detail mattered to him. The way the door was broken, the patterns of entry and exit, the residue of violence left behind. He didn't just see a crime scene. He saw a puzzle, and he knew precisely how to solve it. Tasha, trembling, finally looked up at her brother. Relief washed over her, but so did a dawning realization. Marcus was not just her brother. He was a Delta Force operative, someone trained for situations far beyond the ordinary. Her attackers had no idea who they had provoked, and Marcus's presence was a silent promise of consequences. As they surveyed the apartment, the gravity of the situation set in. The night had changed everything. For Tasha, it was a lesson in vulnerability. For Marcus, it was a call to action. And for the thugs, unknowingly, the nightmare had only just begun. Marcus had always been a quiet presence in Tasha's life, someone who exuded calm and confidence without needing to prove himself. But beneath that calm was a level of skill and discipline most people could only imagine. A Delta Force operative, trained in the most elite and dangerous military operations, Marcus had seen the world at its harshest. Combat zones, hostage rescues, and covert missions had honed him into someone capable of extraordinary precision and strategic thinking. When he received Tasha's call, the emotions he felt were controlled but intense. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, tempered by years of rigorous training in self-discipline. He didn't react with blind fury. He analyzed. Every detail mattered: the description of the attackers, the timing, the way they forced their way in. In Marcus's mind, the pieces began to form a clear picture of who these men were and how best to respond. He first ensured Tasha's immediate safety, checking her injuries and securing the apartment. Then, he began to prepare, not just for confrontation, but for a calculated operation. Marcus knew that this was not about revenge for the sake of emotion. It was about justice, protection, and ensuring that those responsible would never harm anyone again. His military experience had taught him that patience, strategy, and control were as lethal as any weapon. As the night deepened, Marcus moved quietly, surveying the neighborhood and gathering intelligence. He traced leads, noting the patterns of the thug behavior and the likely places they would retreat to. In every step, he was methodical. This wasn't just a personal mission. It was a demonstration of skill honed over years in some of the most dangerous theaters in the world. With a clear picture of the attackers in his mind, Marcus shifted from protective brother to tactical operative. Every movement, every decision was calculated. He knew that these thugs were reckless, relying on intimidation and brute force rather than skill or intelligence. That recklessness was their weakness, and Marcus intended to exploit it. He began by retracing their steps, visiting locations they were known to frequent: bars, convenience stores, and abandoned streets where they thought they could act without consequence. Marcus observed from the shadows, noting their interactions, their hierarchy, and their weaknesses. Unlike them, he moved silently, unseen, and unnoticed. Every detail mattered: their gait, their habits, even the type of vehicles they drove. At the same time, he prepared contingency plans. Marcus wasn't just planning a confrontation. He was planning a controlled operation. Escape routes, environmental advantages, and tactical leverage were all part of his mental map. He visualized every scenario, rehearsing outcomes in his mind until each possible variable was accounted for. His experience in Delta Force meant that nothing was left to chance. Meanwhile, Marcus sent subtle signals to let the thugs know they weren't untouchable. Anonymous tips, strategically placed messages, and small disruptions in their routines were enough to create unease. Fear is a weapon, and Marcus wielded it carefully, psychologically unbalancing them before any physical confrontation. By the time he engaged, they would already be off-kilter, vulnerable to someone who operated with precision and purpose. As the hunt intensified, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility. This was more than retribution. It was about sending a message that violence against his family would have consequences. Every step brought him closer to the confrontation, closer to the justice that the law might not deliver swiftly, but that his training and skill ensured. The moment of confrontation came swiftly, like a storm striking without warning. Marcus had tracked the thugs to a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town. The night was thick with tension, shadows stretching across the cracked pavement, and every sound amplified in the eerie silence. He approached with the precision of a seasoned operative, every movement deliberate, every step measured. Inside, the thugs were unaware that their reckoning had arrived. Their earlier confidence had begun to crack under the subtle pressure Marcus had applied, anxiety creeping into their bravado. Marcus's presence wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Every door he passed, every echo of his movements, amplified the fear he had meticulously cultivated. The confrontation itself was surgical. Marcus didn't rely on chaos or brute force. He used control, strategy, and skill. Each thug was neutralized efficiently, incapacitated, or restrained before they could react. His training in Delta Force allowed him to anticipate their moves, countering aggression with precision. The encounter was brief but decisive, a stark lesson for those who had thought they could terrorize someone else with impunity. When it was over, Marcus stood alone in the quiet aftermath. The thugs were no longer a threat, but the message was clear. Harming his family came with consequences that could not be ignored. Tasha, safe and unharmed now, arrived moments later to witness the aftermath. Relief washed over her, mingled with awe at her brother's capabilities and resolve. The night had been violent, frightening, and transformative. But for Marcus and Tasha, it marked the restoration of security, the triumph of skill and justice over recklessness and hate. The events of that night would linger, an indelible reminder to all involved that underestimating someone trained, disciplined, and fiercely protective was a mistake no one would live to repeat.